Castes in India, Their Mechanism, Genesis and Development, 1916. The opening chapter of Dr. Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar's intellectual journey. Simple, narrative, and inspiring. It was the cold air of New York. The spring of 1916 was unfolding. In the vast library of Columbia University, a young Indian student sat late into the night. Before him lay piles of books, thick volumes of history, anthropology, religion, sociology. Outside the snow was melting, but inside a fire was burning, within the man who wanted to understand his country, his society, his caste, his very existence. That man was Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar. For the first time in America, he experienced what it meant to be called simply a human being, no Brahmin, no untouchable. Sitting in the library, speaking in class, walking on the street, no one asked him what caste he belonged to. This experience was nothing short of a revolution for him. He knew that when he returned to India, the same society awaited him that had since his childhood kept him apart as an untouchable. But now a question had arisen in his mind. What is this caste system? How did it come into being? And why? This very question became his first intellectual quest. Castes in India, Their Mechanism, Genesis and Development. Ambedkar read this essay on May 9, 1916, at Columbia University in an anthropology seminar. Among the listeners sat the renowned American sociologist Alexander Goldenweiser. This was the very classroom where students from across the world presented research on different cultures, some on African tribes, some on Japanese family systems. And here was a young Indian about to speak on the most complex and tragic truth of his society, caste. In his hand were a few pages, but in his heart lay centuries of pain. He said, "For us Indians, caste is not merely a social fact. It is an experience present in every breath of life. And without understanding it, India cannot be understood." His voice was calm, but within him reached a storm. In this essay, Ambedkar did not treat caste as merely a matter of religion, nor merely of economics. He saw it as a social mechanism, a system that separates human beings from one another. He declared, caste is not something natural, it is an artificially created arrangement. He asked, why are there thousands of castes in India, while in other countries society is divided only into classes? And then he answered, because in India, caste is linked to birth, not to work or merit. For the first time, he put forth the principle that the root of caste lies in restrictions on marriage. That is, when groups within a society begin to marry only among themselves, gradually they separate from the rest of society and become castes. He said, endogamy is the heart of caste. If we want to reach the root of caste, we must look at the institution of marriage. This idea was entirely new at that time. Both Indian and Western scholars of that era explained caste in terms of religion, karma, or varna. But Ambedkar for the first time explained it sociologically, at the level of lived practice. He wrote, there is a great difference between varna and caste. Varna is an idea, caste is a social fact. Varna exists in scriptures, caste exists in life. He showed how the Brahmin class, by restricting marriage within itself to preserve its purity, compelled the rest of society to follow the same path. First only the Brahmins began the practice of marrying within, but soon other groups imitated it, and thus society split into countless small castes. The Brahmin built the wall of caste, but others too raised the same walls around themselves, he wrote. This essay was not merely social analysis, it was an awakening. For Ambedkar, it was not just an academic achievement, but the intellectual form of a personal retaliation. He said, the society into which I was born called me an untouchable, but today I will show that this system was not created by divine command, but by man himself, out of selfishness. This thought was nothing less than rebellion, for in those days caste was considered sacred, tied to religion. Ambedkar shattered that myth. He said, If religion destroys human freedom, then it is not religion, but irreligion. And he said this in 1916, at a time when Gandhi had not even returned from South Africa, and the foundations of India's freedom movement were only just being laid. In this essay, Ambedkar deeply studied the genesis of caste. He asked, why did this system arise in India at all? He answered that Indian society was originally organized as Varna, that is division based on work, not birth. But when the Brahmins, in the name of purity, imposed restrictions on marriage within their group, Varna degenerated into caste. He said, Varna is the debased form of Varna. It is a degeneration, not a development. He also explained that once the walls of caste were erected, no one could escape them. It became a society within society, and each caste began to live with a sense of superiority or inferiority. He said, caste has robbed society of the spirit of cooperation. In Indian society, the individual is alone because his relations are confined only to his caste. This idea was nothing short of an explosion at that time. When Columbia professors heard this essay, they were astonished. A young Indian student had explained his country's millennia-old social system with such clarity and logic that all were impressed. Professor Goldenweiser said, this is not just sociology, it is the cry of a true human being for his society. But for Ambedkar, it was not mere academic pride, but it became a mission. He felt that if the caste system could be scientifically analyzed, it could also be destroyed. This thought became the guiding purpose of his life. Break caste, unite humanity. After returning to India, he often said, I have not only seen caste from the outside, I have lived it from within. I know how deep its wounds are. Castes in India was not just an academic essay, it was the first cry of the soul of a young man who was to become the leader of millions. For the first time he declared that caste is not a moral order, but a social disease, and the cure for this disease can only be equality. He also said in this essay that caste persisted in India because people equated religion with social order. He wrote, the function of religion is to make man human, but in India, religion has separated man from man. This sentence became the guiding principle of his entire life. From castes in India began a journey that would later lead to annihilation of caste, who were the Shudras, riddles in Hinduism, and ultimately the Buddha and his Dhamma. But the seed lay in this essay. In this essay, he also pointed towards the solution. He said that until society breaks the restrictions on marriage, the taboos on eating together, and the walls of social contact, caste will not end. He wrote, reform will not come by law alone, but by the moral conscience of society. When human beings share bread and daughters with one another, only then will caste be annihilated. This line later became the slogan of his movement, interdining, intermarriage are the true remedies for caste annihilation. When he wrote this essay, he was only 25 years old, yet his thoughts were as mature as if an entire century had spoken through him. The rebellion within him was disciplined, logical, and profoundly humane. He neither hated anyone nor blamed anyone. He only showed that liberation is possible through understanding the truth. The language he used in this essay, though scholarly, was sensitive. He did not attack any caste or individual. He questioned only the system. This is the greatness of his thought. Even in struggle, he did not lose compassion. This essay was not just a document of sociology, but a mirror of the soul of Indian society. Through it, Ambedkar showed that knowledge should not be used merely to earn degrees, but to recognize the roots of injustice. For the first time, he revealed that caste is not merely a cultural tradition, but an institution of social injustice. He said, until society realizes that caste shackles the human soul, it cannot be free. This was the sentence that laid the foundation of his later political and religious thought. The young Indian student sitting in America did not know that the small essay would change the course of social thought for the next 100 years. But history knew that this very seed would grow into a revolutionary tree. When Columbia professors praised his work, Ambedkar smiled, but in that smile was not pride, but resolve. He knew that one day he must return to the same.